Welcome to Attention Retention with Jackie McManus, your source for the latest trends in transportation recruitment and retention.
And now, back to the Tim Ridley Show.
36 minutes past the hour. This is Tim Ridley on Sirius XM 146 and the Sirius XM app. It is time for our good friend Jackie McManus on Retention Attention. And our number is 615-292-6366 if you'd like to speak with Jackie. And also, if it's easier for you to submit that question or comment via email, email me at tim@radionemo.com. Jackie, good morning to you.
Tim, good morning. How are you?
I am doing well. How about you?
Good. Happy November 1st.
Happy November 1st to you as well. And next thing you know, we'll be saying Happy New Year to each other.
I know. I don't know about you, but this year has just flown by for me.
Oh, my goodness, yes, it really has. It seems like we just entered 2023, and now we're getting ready to exit and go into 2024. But I just hope next year doesn't go quite as fast, but it seems like to me each year. And I remember, my goodness, this was, I guess I was a teenager maybe. My mom says the older you get, the faster the years will go by. And boy, she was not kidding.
Absolutely not. That's so funny. My mom said the same thing. And every year I'm like, Mom, you were not kidding. Because at 14, time just like totally stood still. So, every year is just flying. But excited to be on the show this morning and talk to some drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, you have one waiting. He called in during the last half hour to get a head start. But first, I'm going to ask you, what's going on in the wonderful world of R&R, recruiting and retention these days?
Yes. Well, actually, it's recruiting, retention, and recognition, right? Because drivers is really, really important these days. And so, as companies are winding down, they're really looking at how going into next year or what learning lessons can they take from this previous year in retaining more drivers. And a lot of that is through building and cultivating a very supportive company culture, which is key. The younger generation right now is very much that they have an importance on culture versus pay or, miles. They really care about the companies that they're working for. So it's actually forcing trucking companies to take a look at, okay, we're recruiting these drivers. Maybe there's high turnover. Do we even have a culture with our drivers? What does our culture look like? How do we foster a positive work culture so that we can not only recruit, but then retain drivers? So there's definitely been a lot of shifts and conversations about how do we, I think, let's say, Tim, 5-10 years ago, it's just let's get as many drivers as possible, right? And now it's how do we keep them? Let's peel back the layers of the onion. How do we keep them? How do we recognize them? How do we make sure that they're happy with our company so they don't switch companies or even worse, switch industries, because we're seeing a lot of that too. And so it starts with the companies, and it's really exciting to see that companies are taking that time to figure out, how do we retain more drivers in today's world and tomorrow's world.
We'll change this from double R to triple R because recognition and it's amazing. Jackie, I think about this sometimes from when I first got into trucking to where it is now. The mindset of drivers have changed tremendously. You were mentioning about the younger drivers, and which is good because it has forced the trucking companies to not only treat drivers better, but recognize drivers and make more of a family type home atmosphere with the company. And I remember there was a day, back when in my early days of trucking was you already knew how pretty much you expected how to be treated. That was just a known fact. That didn't bother you because that was just at that time it was part of trucking. But you went more on the looks of the truck, who had the best looking trucks, or who, some of the drivers, and I probably was one I was one in as far as thinking like this. If a trucking company had a very nice piece of equipment that they would give you to drive, you would be willing to pay them to drive their truck, and I remember when I was a small fleet owner, I had a fleet of nice trucks I owned, and I remember one of my drivers, he lived in South Carolina, and he was old school like that. He said, "Mr. Ridley," he said, "this truck is so fine, I'll pay you to drive it. You don't have to pay me, I'll pay you." But that was the mindset years ago. You didn't think pretty much beyond that. Of course, you wanted to make a living, but at the same time, it was a different day and time. It was a different mindset. Sure. But now it is it's so much better because drivers are being more appreciated, and companies have come together to try to be innovative in making a home for a driver where that driver would stay there until he or she retired, so which makes a big difference.
1,000%. Yeah, and for example, I'll be speaking at the Women in Trucking Association next week in Dallas, which I'm really excited about. And I'm on a panel, and it's about how to retain your drivers. And that's probably going to be an action-packed type event, because that's really what the focus is on for companies, is how to retain their employees. We've learned a lot about recruiting all over the years, and it is interesting, Tim, that you mentioned the big shiny truck, because even now with a certain demographic of drivers, we do find that those advertisements do work phenomenally. For sure, with the big shiny trucks, and a couple of our clients right now, they're waiting for their Volvos and brand new Internationals to come in, and that's been definitely delayed over the years with COVID, but they're excited to get those in to start advertising them. But it's really it's exciting to see, because it's about going back to what we talked about earlier in the year, is that the number one thing that's keeping drivers at a company is praise and recognition. Number two is pay. Obviously, pay is very important. The dollars have to make sense for you and your family as a driver. But we've heard time and time again, Tim, of people taking maybe a few cents lower on a dollar to work for a company where they actually know who their wife is, they know who their husband is, they know who their kids are, and have that work-life balance, appreciation. And it's amazing, those soft core values, how much that really goes through the entire workforce, and keeps drivers happy. And so it's really exciting to see the biggest shift in this year has been companies focusing on recognizing and retention, and now it's how do we, keep them happy and engage them on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. We're going to pull over and take us a break. When we come back, Chowder is first in line to speak with you this morning, Jackie. Jackie McManus is with us. This is Tim Ridley on Sirius XM 146. Jackie McManus is with us. This is Tim Ridley on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Jackie, Chowder is wanting to speak with you this morning. Chowder, good morning. You're live on the show with Jackie.
Morning, Jackie. Morning, Tim. Good to hear you, Tim. Glad you're doing well. So,
Thank
Jackie,
you.
I can't say I necessarily disagree with everything you said, and it is probably true in some sector of the trucking world, somewhere in the major metropolitan areas, maybe. But it sounds like a lot of generic speak that I hear a lot from various different recruiting and retention areas, whether it was when I was in the military or in the trucking world, that will tell you all the shiny good things, but in reality, it's not really that way. And I'll give you an example here. I was working for a small company, Midnight Express, 80 trucks, and it was kind of that way. You could get home on a weekly basis, and what they told you was true. But then a certain company, Knight, bought them out and incorporate them into what their way of doing things, which is fine because they bought it and they had the money, the golden rule. They had the golden rule, played by their rules. Yeah. But the problem was, it seemed like once they incorporated you, they totally forgot about why you were at that company to retain you anyway, such as be home every weekend. But when I went to another big company that sponsored this Crete, and they were a good company, they suckered me in by telling me, well, we'll have you on a dedicated home every weekend.
Sure.
Which was great. And I said, so a weekend is Saturday, Sunday, right? And if you're out 5 days, right? Monday through Friday is 5 days. Yes. Well, that turned into being, well, you'll really be home Thursday, Friday because nobody gets Saturday, Sunday off. So what I'm trying to get at is I think these recruiters need to be honest, and that'll keep your drivers more than any of these gimmick carrot dangling things. But they also need to talk to their operations to make sure that's even operatable, because where I'm at now, they would tell me that, yeah, we'll put you on a Baumgars that'll get you home every weekend. Well, what they don't tell you is if you live in the Iowa area, we'll do that. So I get stuck with you'll be home every other weekend. Well, every other weekend, there might be a Sunday, Monday. It might be a Thursday, Friday. And as you know, trying to plan a family life out here when you have to stay out 2 weeks at a time.
Totally.
Unfortunately, I live in beautiful Black Hills, South Dakota, the armpit of the trucking world where nothing permanently comes in, but everybody passes through. That's not really incorporable to most trucking companies, and most of the bigger ones that you can actually get paid at is terrible. But then I've also noticed that the more money you make per mile, it seems like your guarantee of 2,500 miles a week drastically starts dropping off, and it's been at 3 different companies that way. Every time you start to make more per mile, your miles seem to go away. And they'll give their newer people coming in, they give them all those great miles again. But after you hit that about 6 months, it's back to shuffle them down because now we've got you hooked in and you're already invested and it's too costly to leave. So I think the basic problem with retention anymore is they're not honest. They don't speak to their shop, to their operations, and all get on the same page. You go in with 4 different things and you don't know what you're doing. Also, it seems like this loads, whether it's the economy or whatever, you sit around more time than you're driving anymore, wait on a load, because they can't plan you out, but yet they'll tell you they have plenty of plans. And I hear this from numerous drivers in numerous different sectors of the trucking world, all in the reefer where I work, that they have the same problem too. Oh yeah, we're told we have plenty of loads, but we're waiting 18 hours to get them. So is it a planning problem or is it a load problem?
I think you're spot on in that. Here's the dear chatter, is that there are thousands of trucking companies out there, right? This shift of really looking at retention, really looking at how to treat the drivers, it's not going to happen overnight, right? And we can't expect it to, because these companies have been around for years, right? You know, some of these companies started in the 30s and the 40s, right? And some of the bigger companies, like you mentioned, they are publicly held companies and they have investors involved and there's a different chain of command. But what's happening now in the 17 years I've been in the industry, and granted I'm still a newbie if you call it 17 years compared to him, right? Is that we're actually having conversations about it first, about what to do. And I think it starts with educating the trucking companies, and that's my job, is to educate the trucking companies. Granted, let me tell you this, chatter, companies that have, you know, the founder still showing up to the office every day, and he might be 90 years old, it's really hard to get the message across. But the grandchildren are taking over. There is a next evolution of, like, executives that are coming into the space that really want to figure out ways to keep drivers. And so it's a slow adoption rate, but it's at least starting. I would recommend too, why don't you look at, like, there's so many companies out there, like the top 20 best fleets to drive for, or you can email me your resume and I could get you in touch with the trucking companies.
Here's the problem I have. I would say Crete was probably considered one of the top ones. And they weren't bad, but they weren't real honest and good about the scheduling. And I'm thinking I'm finding the biggest problem out here now is, especially like I'm at Schuster now, which they've been fairly good, but their communication and operations is horrible. And it's because they have too many people in positions that have never touched a steering wheel and couldn't tell you the difference between a flywheel and a steering wheel. And yet, like you say, they're trying to tell us how they're going to make recruiting and retention better, but they have no concept of what the actual trucking world is. And I find it quite opposite of what you said. I find the ones that have had multi-generational ownership passed through the family that have actually worked are the better ones to retain people because they actually know what's going on. And that's kind of how our midnight was before night took them over. And I feel sorry for a lot of these older 60-year, 70-year-old family-owned companies that are going to consume, because their drivers are going to have to go find somewhere different to work, because they're not going to have the same environment. It's going to be you're a number and you're going to do it our way, even though we're telling you it's not going to be that way. And as far as, I would send you my resume, but it does no good. I lived in Rapid City, South Dakota, and I've called all the companies. And unless I want to be out 4 weeks at a time, and that's the other problem, that's the dying thing. With this freight, if there's so much freight that they need moved, then there should be no reason why a company couldn't get you to your home time if it's a lane that goes through, but they're not wanting to. And there's not a lot of big box areas to drop freight
Chowder,
in part of South Dakota. So,
Chowder, this is the problem. This is the problem, Chowder. You live in a beautiful state, but it's no man's land according to trucking. So,
that's right.
All right.
You
have
the armpit of trucking world.
That's right. Absolutely. You have a good day, brother. Be safe out there. All right. Let's go to Brian. Brian, good morning. You're live on the show with Jackie.
Good morning, Jackie. Thank you for taking my call.
Good morning, Brian. How are you?
I'm out here living the dream, as always.
I love it.
I have a comment. I'm going to the other end of the spectrum. It just happened Monday. A salesperson came to me and said, "You know where Windridge, Pennsylvania is?"
Okay.
Get back. Why? He said, "Well, I got a load. Can you deliver it?" I said, "Just give me the address and the phone number." Well, last week he set it up. I left Sunday, dropped my trailer, went there Monday morning, got it unloaded. No problem. Came back like always, but he was still there. The salesman was still there, and he personally came out and thanked me for doing it.
Wow.
I know it's a small company, but this is a salesman, and it's like, it is so wonderful. I know it's my job to drive, but of course I made him some coin too, because he told me how much the load was worth. But he didn't have to do that, but he came out and said thank you. I'm like, dude, you're welcome, but that's my quick comment. I've never had that done before. So gratitude goes a long way.
Yep, it's all about having an attitude and a good gratitude for attitude, and that's a beautiful thing. And I love that a salesperson got involved in that way, because it matters to them that their customers are being served, and it comes down to the driver being happy and delivering the load. And that's a great company. And that's what we find with the smaller companies, kind of like what Chowder was saying, is that it really comes down to folks understanding the importance of the driver and really taking that time to recognize them. And so that's a beautiful thing.
I just want to make that comment because I know I'm sorry it happened to you, Chowder, because when I was in a big company, I got treated the same way. But I just found this small company, and basically what they say is true. And, it haven't deviated except last week, but they told me about it. And hey, when a salesman comes out and thank you for doing your job, that goes far. So
it goes a very, very long way.
Makes a big difference.
Okay.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for sharing that with us, brother. Have an awesome day, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. I have an email question for you, Jackie. Todd wants to know, has any companies made any changes for the better lately?
Well, how much time do we have, Todd?
A loaded question, huh?
It's a loaded question, and yes, for sure. I think one thing that Chowder expressed, and he is absolutely right, is that companies that have folks in their management, in leadership, that have actually, had their or CDL driver, which is a lot of our clients. I'd say 50% of our clients had a CDL, word active CDL driver, and still actually carry it. They have a better understanding of what drivers are going through on a day-to-day basis. And so how they treat the drivers, it's very different versus, not to say companies, with folks that, haven't had a CDL aren't good, but I've definitely found that those types of companies are companies that you maybe want to flock to. And that's certainly a question you can ask in the interview process. So it's a lot of recruiters getting in line with operations, and companies really have found that to be the sticking piece of what is the challenge between what they're actually saying to drivers and what operations actually have. So companies definitely are working on that communication more on a weekly basis to make sure recruiter and operations are aligned so that the recruiters are honest with the employee. And it really does start with transparency and honesty from the first phone call. And that's something I talk about constantly, so that when the driver gets...
Claire Marie with today's Transport Trivia. The Federal Highway Administration's National Scenic Byway Program was created in 1991 to promote tourism and to recognize and protect America's most outstanding roads. There are currently 151 byways in 46 states. Roads are chosen for their scenic, natural, historic, cultural, archaeological, and recreational qualities. I'll be back tomorrow with more Transport Trivia. This is Claire Marie.
Okay, what we'll do, Jackie, is let's get you information on how our listeners can get information on you, learn more about,
Hi, this is Claire Marie with today's Transport Trivia.
The
rumble seat was not named for a bumpy ride.
But Jackie, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate you, and we look forward to talking to you next time around.
R-H-U-M-B-L-E, who was an English carriage designer in the late 1800s.
Okay. Jackie, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay. Sorry about that. But yeah, go ahead and get that contact information out on your website as far as that's concerned.
Feel free, drivers and companies, to reach out to me, kjtrans, T-R-A-N-S, media.com. And you can just go right to the website and submit your information, and I will reach out to you shortly. I'm also all over LinkedIn, so Jackie McManus on LinkedIn. And I really appreciate being on the show. It's some great conversation, as always, Tim, and gives us information to give back to our customers. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for all you do, Jackie. We certainly look forward to talking to you next time around.